Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writers in Our Midst, number 30. My name is Sadie, and on behalf of the Port Moody Public Library, I'm so happy to host this event tonight. So happy that you have all joined us for the event tonight as well. I would like to start off by acknowledging that our readings today, as well as all of the work that the library does, takes place on the traditional unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation, and this lies within the shared territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, Musqueam, Kakite, and Katsi nations. I would like to personally thank the Coquitlam First Nation for continuing to live on and care for this land. I'm very quickly going to hand it over to Erik to introduce our authors for the evening. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yep, there's no help. So hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out today for, I can't believe it's already the 30th Writers in Our Midst. I'll say it now so I don't forget later. The next one is going to be on YA, and it's June the 17th. And then I'm looking for ideas for the rest of the year if you have any. I'd love to hear your pitch. So again, thank you, Sadie, for having us. You've been our home for a few years now, and we're very grateful for you supporting local writers. Our first reader today, who volunteered to break the ice, is Trevor Atkins. He lives in the Tri-Cities with his family, but he sees imagined seascapes more often than the ones practically outside his door. I think I'm gonna have a reading problem today. He writes historical adventure novels for middle grade readers and up, including the award-winning Day of the Pirates Went Mad in 2021 and Back to the New Adventure 2024. He's also been known to occasionally submit short stories and poetry to writing contests and magazines, and he shares his new Halloween tale with his mailing list each year. Actually, that's a good idea. Maybe we should do a Halloween one. It's been a while. Trevor is a member of the Tri-City Wordsmiths and the CWILLBC. Trevor, the floor is yours.
Right. Thank you, Erik. Thank you, Sadie. So yes, I have with me today the Day the Pirates Went Mad, and the award that it won recently was at the Whistler Independent Book Awards, and was very nice outing to go up to the Whistler Writers Fest and have that surprise given to me. We didn't know when we got there what was going to happen. So we went up to Whistler and had a nice time there. And then also, in my case, got a little sticker to put on my books. It's shiny. Shiny things are nice. So the Day the Pirates Went Mad takes place at the turn of the 18th century. And the golden age of piracy is just around the corner. We follow Emma Sharp as she learns to sail the seas and bonds with her shipmates and eventually has to save her crew from a cursed pirate treasure. So I have a couple of little excerpts that I was going to read tonight from that. In chapter 7, titled Encounter at Sea, Captain Garrett is planning to replenish their water and lay on new supplies of fruit and fresh meat at St. Iago. And then they sight some potentially unfriendly ships. So they prepped their sails and waited, and then the action. A few minutes later, the frigate tacked their way, clearly intending to intercept them. At the same time, the frigate also hoisted the Union Jack along with a large red pennant signaling their claim of superiority over the New Adventure. They expected the New Adventure to furl its sails, heave to, and wait on their arrival. They have maybe 40 guns all told, reported Mr. Bellows, assessing the frigate through the spyglass. Definitely Navy, observed Captain Garrett. However, their signal is hopeful at best. They cannot catch us, and we're not stopping to be boarded. Let us not draw this out any further, Mr. Bellows. We shall make for Barbados from here. Hoist away. Right you are, sir, replied the first mate. Mr. Bellows strode off, shouting orders to the crew. In seconds, the 3 jibs were hoisted and drawing. As the New Adventure picked up speed, Henry pointed the ship out further into the Atlantic. With the additional sails set, Emma and Jack leaned on the gunwale and watched the frigate start to fall behind, even as it continued the chase. After half an hour, with the sun rapidly setting in front of them, the frigate began to come about. Guess they didn't have the stomach to chase us out into the open ocean, joked Emma as she and Jack watched the frigate turn back. Hi, we sure scared them off, Jack laughed. I'll miss the oranges and bananas, though. Me too, replied Emma, but we do have barrels and barrels of apples. I should know, said Jack, miming a sore back. I carried most of them on board myself. Bilge, exclaimed Emma, recalling the day she'd helped stow the dozens of barrels. You were nowhere about, and conveniently so, I'd say. But that was the first little excerpt. And I wanted to talk a bit about historical fiction and writing it, and something about the research that goes into it. So for me, historical fiction makes learning fun for the readers and for the authors. It's like purpose-driven social studies, and it's a lot more interesting than some class you're forced to sit through. Our writing leads us into learning all sorts of things. The world we write about is not our own invented world, and if there's a question about our setting, we must check it, dig into it, and do some research. People, places, events, technology, everyday life, and food. Behind the Line is a blog series that I write about some of the research that I did in writing this book and its followers. An example is the post titled Barrels of Apples. One of the inspirations for The Day the Pirates Went Mad was Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. The pivotal scene in that story was when Jim Hawkins, at the bottom of an apple barrel, first overhears Long John Silver plotting with the pirates. The events of Treasure Island took place decades after Emma's first adventure in 1701. But surely there would be apples, but I didn't know for sure. I had to check. And in answering this question, I learned a lot more about apples than I ever would have thought to ask. And you can follow the links on the article on the website if you're interested, but yes, apples were available to be taken on sea voyages in many countries. And next came the question that shaped the excerpt I just read about apples and scurvy. To avoid a group of potentially hostile ships, could the new adventure cross the Atlantic earlier than planned? This would mean not visiting the Cape Verde Islands and resupplying with fresh citrus fruits. They had enough food and water aboard, but would there be any issue with scurvy that I would have to address in the story? Scurvy results from the breakdown of collagen. I'm going to tell you some facts now. The glue that holds our bodies together, and vitamin C is utilized in the process of creating collagen. Though apples are not as high in vitamin C as oranges and lemons, it's a factor of 10 actually, eating an apple would definitely provide some benefit. And that was also comparable to the amount of vitamin C that you can get from ginger, which was grown in pots and carried aboard by the Chinese on their ships to ward off scurvy for their sailors, according to writings from 406 AD. So I figure apples are probably pretty good to keep the symptoms of scurvy away. And since it takes a month for them to cross the Atlantic, since it takes a month for symptoms to appear, crossing the Atlantic in about the same amount of time, I concluded as long as the crew was taking in a little bit of apples along the way, they would be fine to reach that farther shore. So now I'll read the second little excerpt, because once I had the apples confirmed, I was able to use them in a number of other scenes with other characters. You know, so-and-so's eating an apple and they throw the core into the ocean. But then I also was able to introduce an apple-based dessert, which required some more research. Did they have apple pies and so on back then? So a version of that we ended up creating. And I was writing this book when my daughter was about 8, I think. And so we did these recipes together to make sure that we knew what we were doing. So when we write about it in the book, then we also tried it out to make sure that it was going to fit the world that I didn't invent, that we all live in. Anyways, in chapter 12, A Pirate's Life, Emma's late to dinner and then helps Cookie take desserts up for the rest of the crew who are on the main deck. While Emma gulped down a serving of the remaining lobscouse, Cookie filled a large tray with pastry-covered desserts. Here, Emma, called Cookie as she positioned the last plates on the tray. You take this one up and I'll bring along the other. All right, Emma dropped her dishes into the washing tub. They smell good. Are they puddings? Something of the sort, only this is me own recipe. It's got plums, apples, and spice. I don't make it often, keeps it special, she gave Emma a wink. Now let's get 'em on up to the others. Cookie led the way up to the main deck and Emma followed. When they began passing out the plates, the crew were quick with their compliments. Cookie pulled out a bottle of brandy from a pocket as she sat herself down between Mr. Bellows and William. Of course it's good, she said to reply to William's enthusiastic praise of the dessert. She took a big swallow from her bottle and then passed it to the one-eyed sailor. It's got fruit and sugar in it. He cannot beat sugar in a dessert. Emma sat down next to Jack. putting her back to the carriage of one of the cannons. "It's really good," he told her through a full mouth. Emma took a bite and let the hot apple and raisin flavors fill her mouth, crunchy, sweet, and delicious. As I said, we tried out this recipe. We came up with our own version, and that's up on the website. I have a couple copies here today if anybody wants to take a paper copy home. But we also have the teacher's guide and other STEM activities to go along with all the learning that we did along the way. Some of it forced into her, but I enjoyed it all. Anyways, the website is emmasharpsadventures.com if you want to check that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. And I don't know, this is up to you. When you're reading, if you want to take a break and do exactly what Trevor did, talk about how you did your research. I challenge you to now. It's Trevor's fault, it's not mine. But it was interesting. Next up is Mallee Stanley. She is a BC writer whose first novel is set in Uganda. You Can't Clap with One Hand was published in 2025. She lived in the East Africa and soon published her second novel set in Tanzania. Although now she calls Canada home, she has lived overseas in Africa, Asia, Australia, and over 40 years. So her writing has an international flavor. She has completed 5 historical fictions set in East Africa, Sri Lanka, India, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, and Canada, and with a through line dealing with racism and patriarchy. She often writes in a woman's voice, and her stories are inspired by personal experiences during her travels.
And I must admit that I took a lot of research for my last book because I'd only been in Uganda about 2 weeks. And the day I was leaving, people told me, "Don't go out tonight. 2 people have been shot in the market." And the Asians police have said, "Don't pick them up. The garbage truck will collect them in the morning." So I left Uganda the very next day. But I did spend a long time in Tanzania, and so I didn't have to do so much research for this book because I had the setting, I knew every street, and I knew what was happening at the time. So I was lucky with this one. But the one I'm working on at the moment, I have to do a lot of research for. I'll read you the back cover first so you know a bit about the story and then read a little bit of the chapter. In 1960s Tanzania, Alia is cherished by her grandfather, yet overshadowed by her mother, who never truly sees her. When political upheaval strips her family of almost everything, and tragedy shatters the one bond that sustains her, Alia is thrust into a life shaped by loss and silence. A fleeting romance leads to a forced marriage, betrayal, and devastating violence. Fleeing scandal, grief, and danger, Alia begins again in Vancouver, but whispers of her past follow, and almost everything she has tried to bury refuses to stay hidden. As buried love and guilt resurface, Alia must confront the truth she has carried across continents. Some paths cannot be outrun, only faced. And most people don't know that in East Africa, there's a lot of Asians from India, Punjabis, a lot of Punjabis, but also people from Gujarat. And so they have the impression that there's only Africans there, but there's a huge community, which I was part of. And so I've written about an Asian community in my story. My head throbbed while I lay sprawled on the floor. In the steamy night, with the cool cement plastered against my stiff arm, a trickle of perspiration drenched the skin over my lip. Nearby, something was being dragged across the floor. With no breeze to whisk away the hostile air, salty liquid ran down the curve of my back. My crumpled housecoat was soaked. Trying to unleash the twisted garment, I raised an arm to free the fabric stronghold on my torso. but a throbbing pain in my head forced me to abandon the move. There it was again, a scraping sound. Another sound. Was it a grunt? When my eyes adjusted to the dim room, I detected the outline of a closed door. I never shut my door to my room at night. What if my daughter has a nightmare? A poster of a Hindu god plastered on the wall emerged. As the tranquil smile of the multicolored goddess crystallized, I realized I wasn't in my room. The poster seemed familiar, but my numb brain couldn't discern where I'd seen it before. I pressed my hand against the floor to get up because I was curious about the mysterious noise, but my hand slid over a slick pool of liquid, darkening the tips of my fingers. As I peered at my hand, a wave of dizziness forced me to shut my eyes. My head sank to the floor and I passed out. When I awoke, a ray of light seeped through a crack in the wall. The door swung open and Amrit ordered me to get up and go into the flat. His hair was ruffled, his shirt stained and crumpled, as if he'd lain in it all night. But from his drawn face, I guess he hadn't slept. I gripped the rail for support, then limped inside. Would he thrash me again in a fanatical frenzy that seized him the night before? His eyes darkened as if with hatred as I edged along the wall, stooping to ease the pain. In the bedroom, I slumped on the bed. Suhur can take care of my daughter's breakfast, I thought. I needed rest, but something about Suhur nagged me. I lay with my arm over my eyes to ease the pain when my daughter bounded into the room. Mummy, Mummy, get up, I'm hungry. Suhur will get you something. I have a headache. Tussie bounded out the room, but soon returned with news that awakened every detail of the previous night's crisis. Mummy, Suhur's gone. Daddy said he's never coming back. Go and sit at the table. I'm coming. I curled into a ball of despair at this news. My beloved Suhur, had he escaped in the night? I blotted my tear-stained cheeks with the bedsheet and suppressed my anguish because Tussie's wavering voice told me she was worried. I hobbled to the bathroom for aspirin and gasped at my reflection, then at my blood-stained fingertips. I swallowed 2 tablets, then scrubbed away the dried blood, checking my face and head to see where it came from, until Amrit barred the door of the bathroom. And I also have copies with me.
I think I remember you reading that at the Port Moody Writers Group. I think.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
It's a long time ago. I'm pushing my memory. Well, let's promote that one a little bit. If any of you creative writers, I think most of you already know this anyways, but the Port Moody Writers Group, they meet Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Fantastic creative writing group, a critique group that you read a little bit, you bring your sheets, you pass them around, you read your bit, and then you get critique from the group. And I feel like all of you already know this, but I wouldn't mind also giving some props to Treasure and Nancy for the Shoreline Writers Group.
That's right.
So you meet
Sundays
once a month.
Well,
Usually you can find it on the Tri-City Wordsmiths Facebook page, the details of it. Bonus props to that one, it's free.
it's at Coquitlam Public Library in the boardroom. The downtown. No, Coquitlam City Center.
Near the mall. Yeah. Another one that I promised Rose that we would promote, and I'm going to try to remember, it's the last Monday evenings at the Evergreen Cultural Center. It's called, it's part of Arts Connect. So it is a vast group of different artists, not all writers. It's actually quite interesting to hang out with other artists who aren't writers because they're so different than us. Like if you meet a singer, they're outgoing. And I mean, dancers and all these groups, and they do different, how would you call it?
It's social. So it's for you to get to know each other. It's free. So at night there is, of course, a bar there, so you can buy beverages, and there's usually some snacks. We had our first one the end of March, and we had about 35 people, and it was very lively. And it's no speechifying, but we will have a guest host, Colin Campbell, who is a game artist and a sketchbook artist. And we're not quite sure how he's going to host it, but it's going to be, again, a chance for you to talk about what you do, maybe some of the projects you're working on, and meet other people with like minds and get into serious conversation.
Yeah, and it's also very interesting to see how other artists approach not only the art that they do, but the business. That's the other side of what we do is we have to sell ourselves, we have to write grants and stuff like that. And all artists suffer the same way when it comes to that. So that's last Monday of every month.
Yeah.
Evergreen Cultural Center.
It's on the Arts Connect calendar, and also will be posted on Creative People Talking on the Facebook news page.
And I believe you have to register for that one, right?
No, neither of them.
Oh, okay.
What time does it start? Does it start?
It's I think we started at around 6.
Next up, we have Nargis. Nargis Abraham has been writing all her adult life as a freelance journalist and as an academic. After her retirement, she tried her hand at creative writing and published a novel titled Moonies at My Doorstep in 2025. She participated in a panel discussion at this year's Hyderabad Literary Festival in India. With an extra bonus, she got to meet several of her former journalism students from over 30 years ago. Currently, she's working on another novel based on her childhood. She's a member of the Tri-City Wordsmiths and the Port Moody Writers Group and lives in Coquitlam. I'm not wearing words.
Yeah, as long as my nose doesn't get hit here, I guess.
Get back in.
See. Okay, so thank you all for being here. And as Erik mentioned, I've been writing since my retirement. Doing creative writing since my retirement. So after a little bit of short stories, I started on this novel and took a while to complete it. But then it was finally published. So I'd like to share some parts of it. It's historical fiction, as is the theme today. And Trevor mentioned and Mallee mentioned that we have to do research. And of course, for history, we've not been there. So I also did some research. And as I was thinking about it, people tell you to write about what you know and the places you know. But for this particular story, I had to write about places that I've never been to. So it's set in the Punjab, in India, and in Scotland, both places I've not been to. So I had to do additional research to make it a little bit authentic. The story has been inspired by my grandmother's foster parents. So my grandmother was an abandoned infant brought up by a British missionary. In this story is about Clara Ferguson, a single woman missionary who brought up an abandoned infant in British India at the turn of the 20th century. So for this evening's reading, I've chosen a scene describing Clara's interaction with local royalty. So the British, who were, considered colonizers, the rulers at that time, the local royalty, there were lots of Maharajas and little principalities in India, and they sort of interacted for political reasons and also for cultural reasons. So in this particular chapter, Clara Ferguson and her friends Martha and Clarence Robson are invited to Diwali celebrations at the Maharaja's palace. The 8th of November dawned crisp and clear. Cool breezes from the Himalayas signal the start of the cold season, a nip in the air reminding everyone to dust off winter coats and stock up on firewood. The last streaks of dust were fading to black when Clara walked out to Dr. Robson's tonga. So tonga is a horse carriage. She glanced back briefly to wave at 2-year-old Esther, perched comfortably in Soraya's arms. Mama, you look rather grand. Martha raised her eyebrows and smiled as she shifted on the seat to make room for Clara. The color suits you. Aren't you glad I persuaded you to send for a new dress? Yes, Martha, thank you. Clara settled herself in and smoothed down her skirt. You look grand yourself. Is that a new bodice? The black velvet is a stunning backdrop for your pearls. The two friends laughed at their mutual compliments and chatted pleasantly for the rest of the ride. Soon, a glow on the horizon indicated they were nearing their destination. The Maharaja's palace was outlined in light, oil lamps positioned evenly along the inner walls and rooftops. Armed sentries stood along the pathway to the main entrance, where guards in ceremonial uniforms came up to help hot the horses, then bowed low as the Robsons and Clara alighted. Welcome, Dr. Robson Sahib. The head butler focused his namaste on the doctor and pointed towards the central ballroom. Without a backward glance, Dr. Robson strode down the long red carpet. Clara and Martha paused, and a woman's figure came forward, bowed her veiled head, and indicated that they follow her. The three women skirted the wall of the dimly lit entrance hall and approached a curtained archway. The maid parted a curtain open, and Clara and Martha blinked in momentary blindness at the bright lights of the ladies' chamber. Tall cut-glass lanterns on the floor, wide with a multitude of candles on the three chandeliers glistening down from the high domes above her. Clara smiled at the happy chaos of activity before her. Elaborately patterned carpets covered the large area, and plush cushions and bolsters were arranged in cozy groupings around the room, where women of various ages were seated in conversation. Gold-lined scarves and gem-studded veils were thrown back across silk-covered shoulders. This was a space where women did not have to hide from the glances of men. Martha and Clara paused to follow the protocol of waiting to be invited in. Soon enough, one of the women detached herself from a small group and came to them, her palms pressed together in greeting. Clara recognized her as Rani number 4. Good evening, Mem Sahib. We are honored that you have come. Good evening, Kamal Rani Sahib. We are honored that you invited us. Martha and Clara pressed palms together in response. Maharani Mataji is expecting you. Let me lead you to her. Kamarani turned towards the far corner where the aging but alert Maharani was seated on an ornately carved Victorian couch, her legs tucked up to her side. Another elaborately dressed woman sat on a stool at the Maharani's feet. Come, sit down, join me. The Maharani sat up a little straighter, diamond-studded earrings swaying as she patted her graying hair, then dabbed at her lips, stained deep red from years of chewing pan. Kalyurani gestured towards an equally ornate love seat, then stepped back and stood looking downwards. Making eye contact with her elders was not done. You have my permission to leave, Kamal Rani Ji. Without a glance towards her son's fourth wife, the Maharani waited for Clara and Martha to sit down. An intricately carved silver case lay open on a side table, and the Maharani selected a beetle leaf from a neat stack in the case, applied a white paste and a dab of a jelly-like substance, folded the leaf, and offered it to Martha. You are very kind, Maharani Ji. Martha accepted the pan with her right hand and placed it in her mouth. It would be an insult to decline something offered by royalty. Clara marveled at her friend's ability to imbibe local customs. She herself had not gotten used to the bittersweet taste. Madam Clara Ji, shall I wrap a pan for you? The Maharani seemed to sense Clara's reluctance, though she was already wrapping up another leaf. Thank you, Maharani Mataji. Surely I would accept it, but my throat is rather sore today. Not today? Then perhaps Rani Kumkumji would like it. The Maharani moved her hands towards the woman seated at her feet and dropped the pan onto the open palm. Rani Kumkum bowed and the Maharani patted her head. My most dutiful daughter, Maharani Mataji's tone of affection demonstrated clear preference for this daughter-in-law, second wife of the crown prince. Such a fruitful daughter, bearing 4 healthy sons for my darling boy, though one would have been enough, of course, as heir to the throne. Kumkum Rani bowed even lower, pulled her veil over her head, and touched her mother-in-law's feet with both hands. The Maharani sighed and turned to Clara. Those boys are running wild these days. They need to get some proper education. Surely the Pandits are doing a good job. Clara referred to the priests whose duties included training young boys in the Hindu scriptures. Yes, but what can I say? Knowledge of traditional scriptures is not enough to prepare them to govern. They need to learn about how the world functions, about the ways of your people. The Maharani looked pointedly at Clara. Did you want us to find a suitable British tutor? We can make inquiries for a male teacher from the community in Ludhiana. Why do we need to go that far when we have the most suitable tutor right here? The Maharani leaned forward. Madam Claraji, we have observed you over the past many years, leading your community wisely, guiding both women and men. We would like you to come educate our children here at the palace. Clara's eyes widened in surprise at the Maharani's request. Momentarily at a loss for words, she turned to Martha. What an excellent offer, Maharani Ji. Martha's positive exclamation encouraged Clara to find her voice. It would be the utmost honor to tutor your heirs, Maharani Mataji, ma'am. Clara stood up and curtsied. Very good, it's settled then. The Maharani sat back. Kumkum Rani will go over the details with you later. As if on cue, a burst of firecrackers came from the inner courtyard. A flurry of children rushed past, followed by a colorful whoosh of silks, as women of all ages hurried to watch the fireworks. Kumkum Rani rose to assist the Maharani to stand up, and her sister Ranis materialized around their mother-in-law. These were the 5 official wives of the Crown Prince Vijay Singh, bound by duty to walk 3 steps behind their mother-in-law. The royal entourage made its way outdoors with Martha and Clara and stepped right after them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nargis. All these years I've never sat there before. For your point of view, I've always been there. I think I'm going to sit there more often. It's a different experience and it's nice. I bought your book at Vancouver Word this year. And bought your book there too, but I gave them to my mom, so maybe I'll have to borrow them back. Actually, Ming, you're next. Ming Louie Stein grew up in East Vancouver and now lives in Port Moody with her husband and two of their beloved pets, a poodle terrier mix and a British short-haired cat. Do they get along?
Is there more?
Yeah, there's more, but do they get along? Sorry, I had to bring it up because mine don't. She has two grandchildren who inspire her every day. Ming began writing after her retirement, and Kitsingi, a woman, is her debut novel. It is a work of auto-fiction. It is a raw, unflinching, multi-themed story about childhood abandonment, cultural shame, and the survival of how a loss of an authentic self is reclaimed through transformation. Ming is a Tai Chi devotee and loves nature. She participates in writing groups, including the Tri-State Wordsmiths, and attends book fairs and author events throughout the Tri-State area.
It's just I don't really have a long bio. Because I'm such a new author, as with my colleagues here, they've written for years and I've never written. Yeah, so like Erik said, Kintsugi is my debut novel. I've never written anything before. And it is a work of autofiction. And so like unlike my colleagues who's done extensive research, a lot of my stories is from word of mouth within my family. And although I did have to research, there is, I think I must have charmed myself onto the spot because I don't really feel that this is really an historical fiction, although a life is set in history, of course, it has to be. But there's not a lot of history, whereas dates, and you have to flip back to see whether everything I said was true, and that sort of thing. But what I'm going to read for you today is very, unfortunately, very, very true. And it's a barbaric thing that happened to women, the art of foot binding. Many of you probably have known about it. And my grandmother, who was born in 1895, had her foot done, bound or binded when she was 5 years old. So this is from her point of view. So keep in mind, I'm reading from my grandmother's point of view. This is chapter 7 in my book. Chapter 7, Traditions, my maternal grandmother's story. Lan Chao, 1890 to 1962. Tradition is a guide and not a jailer. Somerset Mom. My name is Lan Chao. When I was 5 years old, they broke my toes. I sat with my tiny pallid knuckles while gripping the edge of my stool. Then, like a rag doll, my neck flung back as I released a deafening scream that exploded through the room the instant I felt the excruciating pain. Ay-ya, Ama, Ama. My face felt hot like fever, while loose strands of fine hair stuck to my cheeks, wet with mucus and tears. The bright sunlight poured through the wide opening of the double wooden doors. 3 sets of accordion folded panels stood upright and off to one side, welcoming the outdoors to stretch across the entire length and depth of the room. The stone pavers of the courtyard merged with the wooden floors. The walls and the furniture are all darkly stained, created a warm backdrop for the vibrant reds and fuchsias and the greens of the cushions, which added color to an otherwise monotonous space. 3 women had arrived earlier from the neighboring villages. They were experts in the procedure, having performed it dozens of times before. They wore identical uniforms with loose black tunics and trousers. However, each suit was embellished with its own embroidered design of bandom color. The needlework framed the collar and extended down across the chest and under the arm, and delicate little fabric frog fasteners held their garments together, and their matching headbands secured their neatly tucked hair. Be brave and sit still, the women sang in staccato unison. They surrounded me on rosewood stools. My mother was absent. She could not bear to watch me suffer the way she had so many years ago. Supplies of thin silk strips, a tin of alum, a small pile of washcloths, and a tub of warm water were ready for use. 5 was believed to be the perfect age for the binding process to begin. The size was considered ideal and the bones were malleable. First, they soaked my feet in warm water, then they trimmed my toenails. After drying my feet, the 2 women held me steady while the elder woman quickly snapped my 4 toes back. It was so sudden that I did not remember if I heard the snap or felt the pain first. One woman sat beside me, attempting to comfort me. It was not until my tears were wiped away with a cool, wet towel and the wisps of hair were laid behind my ears that my screams quieted into trembling sobs. While gently patting my small forehead and my face with the moist washcloth, the woman whispered soothingly as she stroked my hair. I reached out for her hand and I clung to it. You will be fine. You will be all right. You will survive. Every little girl before you did. She paused and then she added, it's painful, yes, but it's only a little pain to endure if you want to secure a good husband and have a good life. The big toes on either foot would carry my body weight when the process was complete. Next, they dried my feet and sprinkled them generously with alum. To ensure that the toes stay flat against my sole, they tightly wrapped them with the long strips of silk. During the next 2 weeks, I endured unbearable pain. When the women returned to change the silk wrappings, they examined the placement of my toes and the conditions of my toenails. They removed the old silks and noticed that the soaked layers of fabric closer to my skin, which released a foul and putrid smell. My toenails grew into my flesh, causing open sores and infection that left me sweating and trembling with pain. The same woman who had comforted me 2 weeks ago sat beside me and cooled my face with a clean, wet washcloth. She held my arms down to stop me from shaking, but without success. They told me that sometimes the bones of the heel had to be crushed to achieve the desired shape. Fortunately, I did not need that. Using a mixture of alum and warm water, the woman soaked and cleaned my feet again. They rewrapped the bindings tighter and tighter every 2 weeks, repositioning my bones, returning and continuing until my feet stopped growing, and the result was a doll-sized, tiny lotus bud foot. The practice of foot binding dated as far back as the 13th century, when the Mongols invaded and conquered the Han people in China. Ironically, it was the Han women who desired to identify themselves as an elite ethnic group. They wanted to separate themselves from the so-called uncivilized ruffians who ruled over them for 150 years. The Han women had lotus feet and wore little embroidered lotus shoes. The practice became a status symbol among nobles and aristocrats. For centuries, the Chinese regarded lotus feet as erotic and sensual. The courtesans glided across the floors with their tiny steps hidden beneath their long silk dresses, and the men fantasized about caressing the soft, tiny feet like forbidden fruit. The daughters with tiny feet were considered more valuable and more desirable, and often receiving proposals from wealthier families. And daughters grew up bound by duty and strict social norms. When young, a daughter obeyed her parents and elders from her extended family. She presented herself with composure, grace, and elegance. She remained chaste until her wedding night. After marriage, her duty was first to obey her in-laws and then her husband. Later, after the death of her in-laws and husband, she obeyed her eldest son. Her purpose in life was to bear children and deliver a male heir. Girls who did not bind their feet could not elevate the family's rank, and therefore society regarded them as less worthy. They became housemaids and farm workers and were married off to poorer families. They were at the mercy of their in-laws and often suffered domestic abuse. In the early 1920s, marked the end of the Qing dynasty, which brought an end to foot binding. I was one of the last women in China with bound feet, having turned 5 in 1895. To prepare for marriage, I learned sewing, embroidery, weaving, and flower arranging. To pour and serve tea with elegance and to perform tea ceremonies were but 2 of the many household rituals. Although I was illiterate, I could recite poetry. I also entertained guests by playing the zhang, a Chinese style zither. And by the time I was 46 years old, I had birthed 8 children, 3 sons and 5 daughters. Anui, and she now was my 8th. Anui's mother, she now was my 8th. That's chapter 7 of my book.
No funny jokes after that one. That must have been hard to write. And I know writers often parts of our books are difficult and we just like, oh, I have to write that chapter today. So that must have been a tough one, but very brilliant. I felt it just now too. I had said in most of the promotions that creative fiction was also going to include creative nonfiction. That's what we're going to get now. So Cheryl Andrichuk has worn many hats: teacher, administrator, marketing guru, magazine editor, caregiver, and cybersecurity researcher. Her favorite role, though, is storytelling. She enjoys sharing her own adventures in written and spoken word and has picked up a few kudos along the way. When she's not agonizing over the perfect adjective or debating the Oxford comma, you'll find her avoiding housework by hanging out with her grandkids or trying, with mixed success, to convince her corgi poo he's a super dog material.
So this is a story that I just went to Powell River to research. I got to go to the museum and look in the archives. I walked up the hills and I saw all the places, and I just really made it come to life for me, and it's helped me to write the story, I think. So my uncle Nick died in World War II when he crashed his plane in a field in southeast England. 60 years later, the woman who saw him crashed when she was 10 years old found a bracelet in her garden, and it said, "To Nick from Ellen." And she managed to contact people in Canada, long story, and got the bracelet back to us, his family. And when we got the bracelet, it inspired me to write this story, and it's a work in progress. And here's an excerpt. Oh, excerpt is hard to say. The end and the beginning. "Dolly, it's time for tea," Bernice said. She set her rag doll against the rocks she'd arranged as chairs for her tea party guests, Dolly and Brownie the bear. It was 1944 in southeast England, and the trio were in the front yard of the 2-story brick house where Bernice lived with her mom and dad. The doll slumped forward, and Bernice shook her blonde curls in consternation and pushed the doll upright. "Sit up straight like Brownie," she said. Then she put out tin teacups, saucers, and plates for each of them. The tea set had been her aunt's, and the red gingham pattern was now faded. Bernice picked up the slightly dented teapot, which was missing its lid, and said, "I'll be mother." She primly poured a muddy liquid made with grass and clover into each cup. Bread and jam. She imagined Dolly and Brownie politely accepting the offer and placed a peony leaf with a dollop of mud on each tin plate. This last Saturday in May was sunny and warm, and Bernice had been sent outside to play while Mummy tended the garden that everyone seemed to have these days. With the noonday heat and the effort of collecting mud, sticks, and grass for the feast, Bernice felt warm enough to remove her brown woolen jumper. She pushed up the sleeves of her hand-me-down cotton dress, pulling at the Peter Pan collar, which pressed tight against her neck. In the distance, she heard the low, rough growl of a Hawker Typhoon. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. Although only 10 years old, she could tell the difference between the Canadians' aircraft and the steadier rumble of the American P-47 Thunderbolts. The war against Hitler had been going on for almost half her life, and the airfield full of Yanks and Canadians was only 2 miles away, so she was used to airplanes passing over her house. Her parents' friends complained about those bloody planes flying overhead, but not Daddy. He could name every plane. He taught her to identify them by their shape and the sound of their engines. As she pretended to sip tea, the Typhoon's growl grew louder. When a second engine rumbled, deeper and heavier, she frowned and cocked her head. They didn't usually sound like this. She squinted into the bright sky until she finally spotted them, the egg-shaped Thunderbolt first, and the narrow, long-nosed Typhoon close behind. She'd watched Allied pilots from the nearby airfield practice dogfights before, chasing each other across the sky, but today they were flying very low. She shaded her eyes with her hand just as the Thunderbolt rolled into a turn. The Typhoon followed at once, climbing hard to stay with it, the two of them circling tightly, one trying to catch the other. She thought the Typhoon might get behind the American plane, but something seemed different. The Typhoon's nose lifted up high, and the plane seemed to hang in the air for a moment. Then it jerked suddenly and tipped. One wing dropped, and the plane started to turn. Then it kept turning, faster and faster. The sound changed. The growl became a sputtering, choking roar. The Thunderbolt climbed and banked away. Maybe it was going for help, she thought, but she immediately forgot about it because the Typhoon was going round and round, lower with each turn. The roar suddenly stopped, and the sky was quiet, except for the low, throbbing whir. The propeller looked like a windmill. The spinning shape seemed to be dropping straight toward her, the rush of air getting louder and louder. It screamed down into the neighbor's field, 100 yards from her. The whooshing noise stopped with a heavy thud, and the ground shook under her feet. The plane burst into flames. For a second, Bernice couldn't hear anything. Then the crackle of flames and a hissing noise came from the wreck, now a crumbled mass of metal and fire. Abandoning Dolly and Brownie, Bernice ran. She fled around the side of the house to the front garden where her mother was already racing toward her. Bernice's voice broke as she cried out, "Mummy!" The pilot's name was Erik D'Souza. He was 24 years old. When Nick was 6, the family moved from Bonnyville, Alberta, and settled on an acreage in Cranberry, just up the hill from the Powell River pulp mill. Ever since he could remember, Nick had loved spending time with Mama in the kitchen. He would haul in water and wood or take his turn at the hot stove as she put up preserves. She sang him songs about the river back home, or the girl waiting for her lover gone to war. He taught her English songs from school or told her about his day, what the other children were like and what he had learned. She soaked it in and would cradle his face in her hands and say, "Moja serce," my heart. Among his 4 brothers and sister, he was his mother's favorite, and she was his. She was easy to love. Of course, he loved his father too, but Tato was a practical man of few words who did things his own way. He was proud and principled, refusing to work at the mill because the bosses were known to demand favors from immigrant workers or their wives. Tato wanted no part of it. Instead, he worked his land and took on odd jobs. He expected his sons to help in the field to clear rocks and stumps so they could grow their own vegetables, potatoes, cabbage, onions, carrots, and keep a few chickens. But Nick always found a reason to be in the kitchen where his mother would smile and hand him a spoon or a mortar and pestle. When Nick finished high school, he took a job at the pulp mill. It was the best paying work available to the son of a Ukrainian immigrant. And unlike his father, he was single, with nothing the foreman could demand from him. Nick started work in the Barker mill as a block loader. Before logs could be made into paper, their bark was stripped and they were cut into 2-foot lengths. These blocks were carried along moving chains to the wood room where Nick worked. 6 grueling days a week, he stood beside the rattling chain in the noise and stench, guiding the wet blocks as they slid past nonstop. Using a hook, sometimes even his bare hands, he kept the blocks straight and moving. The worst part was clearing jams. When the blocks piled up but the chains kept moving, he had to act fast then, pulling and twisting to shove them back in place so the line didn't back up and force the grinders to stop. Nick could almost get used to the constant clanging and rumble, but the smell was the worst part. Wet wood with an underbite of hot oil and metal, and the ever-present stink of rotting cabbage mixed with rotten eggs from the cooking vats. He was always in motion, the machinery vibrating through his feet as he shifted constantly to keep his balance on the slick floor. The wood came in wet from the booms, and even after it was cut, the wood dripped as it rattled past. His flannel shirt and wool trousers soaked through early in the shift. His canvas gloves never really dried. They kept the splinters out, but sometimes it was easier to work without them. At the end of each shift, the long blast of the steam whistle cut through the noise around him, and Nick passed his hook to the man replacing him. The mill never stopped. Once outside, he felt the breeze on his face and breathed in the evening air, less pungent than inside the mill. He walked home uphill through the town site every evening and could tell the wind direction by how bad the odor was. The people of Powell River called it the smell of money. It was true. Almost everyone he knew was employed by the mill. The woodroom work was hard, but Nick figured it was worth it. The union wages were decent, and Nick wanted to buy his mother a washing machine. Yet the excitement and pride of getting the job was soon overshadowed by the repetitive, strenuous reality. This was not what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. Still, 3 years passed, and he was still there. Then one clear January day, Nick came home to find his brother waiting on the stoop of their faded wood house. John's coat collar was turned up, and he wore the grin Nick remembered from when John would convince him to play hooky and go fishing. "They're signing men up in town," John said. "I joined this morning, Air Force." Nick looked back toward the mill, dark gray smoke pouring from the twin stacks. He could smell the mill on his shirt, wet wood and oil. A pebble poked through his worn soles, even though he had lined them with pages from the Eaton's catalog. "I hear they give you new boots." John laughed. "Good a reason as any to join." "I'll go tomorrow," Nick said. "We better tell Mama." Mama was humming a familiar song as she cut thick slices of bread from a fresh loaf. A pot of steaming borscht simmered on the stove. As they sat down to dinner, Nick reached for his mother's hand. John cleared his throat. "Mama, Tato, we're joining up." His father examined his spoon, then lifted his head and nodded. "Tak." Nick couldn't read his face. Tato had spent a year in a Canadian internment camp during World War I when the government had classified Ukrainian immigrants as enemy aliens. Nick wondered how his father felt. Was he proud his sons had a chance to prove their loyalty to Canada? Maybe he was thinking they'd come back with opportunities he'd never had, a skill or a trade. Mama made the sign of the cross before cupping his face in her hands. Tears filled her eyes. "Moja serce," she said.
I take it you historical fiction, nonfiction writers enjoy your research. That seems to be a draw. Writing crime and cozy crime, a lot of times I could be like, yeah, that sounds real enough. Good enough. You can't do that. So I appreciate that. Although It's never a good idea, they say, to look up the Google searches of crime writers. You're gonna be grisly. So you basically have Gisella's spot. It's almost tradition to have Gisela and the night. The one thing she doesn't write apparently is historical fiction. So Nancy McNeil is a 2025 debut children's picture book author. Her book, Becky's Farming Adventures, Becky and the Trailer Kids, won a silver medal in the 2025 Golden Book Awards Children's Farms Life Competition. Nancy shares this award with Samilia, her Get Your Books Illustrations, Beautiful Illustrations, and Kezia, GYBI, stunning cover and amazing book design. Nancy's initial genre was historical fiction. She has an unpublished children's historical fiction novel. However, she prefers to write and self-publish children's picture books. Nancy and her husband live in a small farm in Coquitlam, BC. She tends her nursery trees and has raised animals like goats, sheep, and alpaca.
I think it's good. Thanks. Good evening, everyone. Besides writing children's picture books, I also enjoy writing flash fiction, and I enjoy writing short stories, and I love historical fiction. And someday I will get back to that novel and finish it. Right now, what I've written is a short story for children about World War II. It's called A Wartime Spring Day on the Farm. Max rolled over and sank his face into his pillow as the first rays of sunlight peeked through his frayed curtains. Just a few more minutes, he thought, while the cows bawled. It was early April, and Max shivered as he changed into his work clothes. "Morning, Mama," Max said, watching Marion at the wood stove. She struck a match, which burst into flame, while consuming the kindling before she added a chunk of wood. "Breakfast will be ready once you're back. You better get a wiggle on. Those cows won't milk themselves. And don't forget to feed the barn cats." Max nodded as he strode toward the mudroom. Stepping outside, the morning air slapped his face and stung his eyes as he grabbed the empty milk pails. "Dad, I love and miss you. Going from crop dusting to flying warplanes has got to be a lot more fun than staying home to milk cows." Max paused to allow his eyes to adjust to the dimness inside the barn. The 6 girls were now his girls. Soon the barn was filled with their gentle moos. "Morning, Daisy," Max whispered while sliding his hand down her flank. Daisy tossed her head while Max rubbed his hands together before beginning his milking routine. An hour later, 2 steaming pails were ready for the kitchen. "Okay, Patches and Benny, come and get it." 2 mangy-looking barn cats leapt from their hay bale toward a warm milk bowl. "Enjoy and have fun catching mice today. At least you'll have fun. See ya, girls," Max said. Max scanned the horizon, as he often did. Thick, dark clouds filled the distant western sky. Don't like the look of that. Back inside, Max sipped his coffee, looked at the clock, raised his eyebrows, and gobbled his breakfast. "If you run, you might catch Becky and Ruthie. They left for school about 10 minutes ago," Marion said. "Mom, I should stay here and help you. The sun's up, but the western sky's graying. We could be in for a spring storm." "I'll be fine, and no, there won't be a storm." "Max, are you trying to skip school today? Your father said that you and your sisters must finish school. It's important to him and to me." "No buts, Max," Marion said as she saw her son's lips part in protest. Pink-cheeked Max grabbed his lunch pail and books. "Please come home soon, Dad." He laced up and raced to meet his sisters. "Took you long enough," Becky said, smiling. "Have fun after school doing housework." "I work outside," he thought, as he sprinted onwards just as the warning bell rang. "Settle down, everyone," said Mrs. Everton. "Middle graders, open your math textbook and work on page 35's math problems. 2 to 4s at the blackboard, please, for more writing practice." The children settled, until the only sound was a steady hum from the 2 overhead light bulbs. Max, busy solving math problems, felt his friend bump his arm. Creaking and groaning came from the school's roof. Outside, debris flew past the windows. Max's jaws dropped and his interest in math dissolved. We've got to get home. Becky, Ruthie, let's go, shouted Max. The wide-eyed threesome sprinted for the door, which blew open. Tree branches, old leaves, and laundry flew past, with each gust getting stronger. Wait, shouted Mrs. Everton. Screaming children bolted for the door. They knew that spring prairie storms were unpredictable. It was best to be home. Once outside, the kids scattered in all directions. The wind picked up and whipped their faces, making breathing and running difficult. Max and Becky grabbed Ruthie's hands as her feet lifted off the ground. By the time the trio reached the farm, hail the size of dimes pelted everything. Slush puddles formed between the house and the barn. Marion grabbed a drenched and shivering Ruthie while Max and Becky raced for the barn's sliding door. Pull harder, Max shouted, but the wind carried his words away. It took 4 hands and strained muscles to slide the barn door open, enough for them to scramble inside. Max grabbed Daisy's lead and secured her first before her 5 sisters. Becky soothed and secured the wide-eyed mare Annabelle and her gelded brother Buddy. Wind gusts screamed while chunks of hail and roofing shakes fell onto the calves' heads and backs. Max and Becky looked upward and saw swirling grayness as more shakes exploded, showering them. Max yelled into Becky's ear, "Move the girls beside Annabelle and Buddy." She nodded and worked quickly to secure them with the terrified pair. Thunder roared and lightning flashed as the siblings dove into a hay pile. Surfacing, Becky grabbed Patches while Max grabbed Benny. Sister clung to brother as they each hugged their barn cat while whirling, swirling chaos surrounded them. But as quickly as the storm erupted, it was gone. Max and Becky shook off the debris before climbing out of the hay. "You're okay," Becky repeated, trying to calm both herself and the terrorized animals. Max surveyed the damage. "Crap! The cow stalls are a disaster," he yelled as the last few wood splinters and ice pellets rained down. Becky rounded the house yelling, "Mom, Ruthie, are you all right?" "We're fine," cried Marion as she grabbed Ruthie and said, "Stay here." Marion saw the roof's rubble in the yard and called out, "Max, are you okay?" "Yes, ma'am, I'm all right, but the roof." "Never mind," said Marion. "Let's find those oil tarps your father used. We need to cover the missing roof as best we can until the community gathers to form a repair plan. I'm sure many barns are like ours." The old oil tarps were right where Frank had left them. Max grabbed and dragged them outside while Marion collected the ladder from under the veranda. Tool-belted Max helped her right the ladder against the barn. It took all of Max's strength to climb upward while dragging an oil tarp before positioning and nailing it in place. This was slow, tedious, and dangerous work. By sunset, the barn's roof looked like a patchwork quilt. From the top of the barn, Max admired his work. Descending, an exhausted young man returned to earth. What a day it had been.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I think we should talk weight pine. I know I saw your book in this year's collection. I think, yes. I see a lot of posts. I think it's in the White Pines collection for 2025. Yes. And so
This one's not there
yeah.
yet.
Is there a gala this year?
There will be, but it will probably be in the fall this year.
Oh, okay.
Thing.
Okay. So not only does Port Moody help celebrate local authors by supporting this night, they also do the White Pines collection. So if you submit your book, there's a process to it, but you can see them. You can see, I think, through the shelves. You can see the White Pines collection, a good mix of lots of local. I believe they have to be Tri-Cities.
Tri-City, Anmore, Belcarra, and Burnaby are the communities, so.
Oh,
yeah.
It's expanded.
So US, not West, not. That's good. You say if they're out, they're not out there, you can submit them.
Who would they talk to?
Me. You is to submit the application form online, and once that form is submitted, that comes to me and I do the ordering of the books. And then we do a little bit of promotion that goes along with them. So each of the authors, when they get added to the collection, there's a blog post that goes out that highlights the author and their book and talks a little bit about the writing. And then every year we do the gala, which celebrates all of the authors that have been added to that collection within the last year. An evening to celebrate everyone.
And I've been to the gala a couple of times, just in the Evergreen. No, sorry, in our what you call it, or in the theater. I'm tired. I'm sorry. I struggled with your volumes today, so I apologize for that. And I thank you all for coming out today. If you were came here as a listener, thank you so much, because it was beautiful outside, so it must have been hard to commit inside. As I mentioned, June 17th, YA. And I think we're going to do a Halloween one. Halloween's always fun. So Trevor, you get to read your story again. Once he came, or a couple of times, he gets dressed up for it. So Halloween's always fun. Thank you again to the Port Moody Library, and thank you again for coming in.